Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. In meeting 6 of qualitative research methodology in ELT, we will talk about collecting qualitative research data with questionnaires and interviews. Questionnaires and interviews as data collection methods. Questionnaires and interviews are used extensively in educational research to collect data about phenomena that are not directly observable. Inner experience, opinions, values, interests, and the like. They also can be used to collect data about observable phenomena, but more conveniently than by direct observation. For example, it is much easier to use a questionnaire or interview to ask a principal how many teachers have at least one computer in their classroom than to walk around the school and make your own count. Of course, the advantage of ease is negated if the resulting data have poor validity. Questionnaires are documents that ask the same questions of all individuals in the sample. If the sample has subgroups, the questions asked of each subgroup may vary. Respondents record a written or typed response to each questionnaire item. Also, the respondents typically control the data collection process. They can fill out the questionnaire at their convenience, answer the items in any order, take more than one sitting to complete it, make marginal comments, or skip questions. Interviews. Interviews consist of oral questions asked by the interviewer and oral responses by the research participants. Interviews typically involve individual respondents, but there is increasing interest in conducting group interviews. Respondents typically speak in their own words, and their responses are recorded by the interviewer, either verbatim, on audio tape or videotape, through handwritten or computer-generated notes, or in short-term memory for later note-taking. The interviewer is largely in control of the response situation, scheduling with the participant a mutually agreeable time and place, and then controlling the question pace and sequence to fit the circumstances of the situations. Selecting between questionnaires and interviews. Questionnaires have two advantages over interviews for collecting research data. The cost of sampling respondents over a wide geographic area is lower, and the time required to collect the data typically is much less. Questionnaires, however, cannot probe deeply into respondents' beliefs, attitudes, and inner experience. Also, once the questionnaire has been distributed, it is not possible to modify the items, even if they are unclear to some respondents. The major advantage of interviews is their adaptability. Skilled interviewers can follow up respondents' answers to obtain more information and clarify vague statements. They also can build trust and rapport with respondents, thus making it possible to obtain information that the individual probably would not reveal by any other data collection method. This advantage of the interview method is offset by some limitation. One is that it is difficult to standardize the interview situation so that the interviewer does not influence the respondent to answer questions in a certain way. Another limitation is that interviews cannot provide anonymity for the respondents. In other words, the respondents must reveal their identity to the interviewer. Of course, the interviewer can analyze and report the interview data so that the identity of the participant is not revealed. The questionnaire is more commonly used in quantitative research because its standardized, highly structured design is compatible with this approach. The interview is more commonly used in qualitative research because it permits open-ended exploration of topics and elicit responses that are couched in the unique words of the respondents. However, both methods can be used in either type of research. Robert Ian, for example, recommends using both methods when doing case study research. Validity and reliability issues. Questionnaires and interviews must meet the same standards of validity and reliability that apply to other data collection measures in educational research. As we explained below, these standards are discussed at length elsewhere in the book. Therefore, do not interpret our brief treatment of validity and reliability here as an indication that they are central to good questionnaires and interview design. If you are using a questionnaire or interview in a quantitative study, the validity and reliability standard described in the chapter on test, chapter 7, are relevant. For example, questionnaires often solicit respondents' opinion about particular topics and issues. If the researcher wishes to claim that these are the respondents' true opinion, she should collect evidence that the content of the items represent this construct content-related evidence of validity. Another opinion is to determine whether the respondents express similar opinions on other measures of the same construct or convergent evidence of validity. In practice, researchers tend to apply looser validity and reliability standards to questionnaires and interviews than to tests because they typically are collecting information that is highly structured and likely to be valid. For example, the respondents' years of schooling. Also, they are interested in the average response of the total group rather than the response of a single individual. A lower level of item reliability is acceptable when the data are to be analyzed and reported at the group level than at the level of individual respondents. Now, let's take a look at the steps in constructing and administering a research questionnaire. In this section, we describe the major steps in carrying out a research study using a questionnaire. First, defining research objectives. Second, selecting a sample. The third, designing the questionnaire format. The fourth, pre-testing the questionnaire. Fifth, pre-contacting the sample. Sixth, writing a cover letter and distributing the questionnaire. Seventh, following up with non-respondents. And eighth, analyzing questionnaire data. Step 1. Defining research objectives. Some researchers develop a questionnaire before they have thoroughly considered what they hope to obtain from the results. It is important that you define the research problem and list the specific objectives to be achieved or hypotheses to be tested by the questionnaire. You might start with a broad topic, for example, teachers' involvement in staff development, but you should sharpen its focus before beginning on the design of the questionnaire. The DeVos suggested 5 types of questions that you can ask yourself for this purpose. They are stated below in relation to the above-mentioned topic, teachers' involvement in staff development. Number 1, what is the time frame of your interest? Are you interested in teachers' current involvement in staff development? Or do you want to study trends in their involvement over a period of years? Number 2, what is the geographical location of your interest? Number 3, are you interested in a broad descriptive study? Or do you want to specify and compare different subgroups? Number 4, what aspect of the topic do you want to study? Number 5, how abstract is your interest? Step 2, selecting a sample. Once your research objectives or hypotheses are clearly stated, you should identify the target population from which your sample will be selected. If you do not have zero knowledge of the situation, you might make the mistake of sending your questionnaire to a group that does not have the desired information. For example, a graduate student seeking data on school financial policies and questionnaires to principals of elementary and secondary schools. Many of the returned questionnaires were incomplete and few specific facts of the sort wanted were obtained. This questionnaire failed because at the time the school superintendent and district specialist handled most matters concerning school finance. Because the principals who received the questionnaire had little specific knowledge about the topic, they were unable to supply the information requested. Step 3. Designing the questionnaire. Some research questionnaires appear to have been thrown together in an hour or two. The experience of receiving these haphazard questionnaires has led many educators to develop negative attitudes about the questionnaire as a research approach, and so they deposit them in the recycling box with little more than a quick glance. You will need to overcome these negative attitudes by careful construction and administration of your questionnaire. Guidelines for designing a questionnaire. Number 1. Keep the questionnaire as short as possible. Number 2. Do not use technical terms, jargon, or complex terms that respondents may not understand. Number 3. Avoid using the words questionnaire or checklist on your form. Many persons are biased against these terms. Number 4. Make the questionnaire attractive by such techniques as using brightly colored ink or paper and laser printing. Number 5. Organize the items so they are easy to read and complete. 6. Number the questionnaire pages and items. 7. Put the name and address of the individual to whom the questionnaire should be returned, both at the beginning and end of the questionnaire, even if a self-addressed envelope is inserted. Number 8. Include brief clear instructions printed in bold type and in upper and lower case. Words that are all capital letters are hard to read. 9. Organize the questionnaire in a logical sequence. For example, you might group items with the same content or items having the same response option together. Number 10. When moving to a new topic, include a transitional sentence to help respondents switch their train of thought. 11. Begin with a few interesting and non-threatening items. 12. Put threatening or difficult items near the end of the questionnaire. 13. Do not put important items at the end of a long questionnaire. 14. Provide a rationale for the item so that the respondent understands their relevance to the study. 15. Include examples of how to respond to items that might be confusing or difficult to understand. 16. Avoid terms like several, most, and usually, which have no precise meaning. 17. State each item in as brief a form as possible. 18. Avoid negatively stated items because they are likely to be misread by respondents. The negative words tends to be overlooked and respondents might give an answer that is opposite to their real opinion. 19. Avoid double-barreled items that require the subject to respond to two separate ideas with a single answer. For example, although labor unions are desirable in most fields, they have no place in the teaching profession. 20. When a general question and a related specific question are to be asked together, it is preferable to ask the general question first. If the specific question is asked first, it tends to narrow unnecessarily the respondent's focus when answering the general question that follows. 21. Avoid biased or leading question. If the respondent is given hints as to the type of answer that is preferred, there is a tendency to give that response. Anonymity. In most educational studies, respondents are asked to identify themselves, but anonymity might be necessary if highly personal or threatening information is requested. A questionnaire dealing with sexual behavior, for example, might receive more honest responses if the respondents remain anonymous. Item form. Writing item for questionnaires and for interviews too may seem straightforward, but it is actually an art form. You need to be able to write succinctly and clearly. This is no easy matter. More importantly, you need to have a good understanding of your respondents so that you can use language that they understand, so that you can obtain all the information you need without exhausting their patience, and so that the items engage their interest and willingness to respond honestly. A question or item can be either a closed form, meaning that the question permits only pre-specified responses, similar to a multiple choice question, or open form, meaning that the respondents can make any response they wish, similar to an essay question. Which form to use is determined by the objective of the particular question. Evidence on the relative merits of closed and open questions, however, suggests that the two formats produce similar information. The advantage of designing question in closed form is that it makes quantification and analysis of result easier. For example, suppose you wish to know the size of a teacher's hometown. Probably the least useful way to ask the question is, what is your hometown? What is the population of your hometown? Check one and provide the following response choice. This item requires little effort on your part to analyze the data and also minimal effort from the respondents. Step 4. Pilot testing the questionnaire. You should carry out a thorough pilot test of the questionnaire before using it in your study. The pilot test should include a sample of individuals from the population from which you plan to draw your respondents. Also, the pilot test form of the questionnaires should provide space for respondents to make criticism and recommendation for improving the questionnaire. Another useful pilot test strategy is to ask respondents to state in their own words what they think each question means. The question should be revised and retested until they are understood accurately by all or most members of the pilot test sample. Step 5. Pre-contacting the sample. Researchers have found that contacting respondents before sending a questionnaire increases the rate of response. A pre-contact involves the researchers identifying themselves, discussing the purpose of the study, and requesting cooperation. Step 6. Writing a cover letter. The main objective in doing a questionnaire survey is to get a high return rate. We know of studies where the return rate was as low as 20%, which makes it virtually impossible to generalize from the sample's data to the population that it is intended to represent. This is an example of sample cover letter for a mail questionnaire. There is a letterhead paper, there is use mail merge feature, duplicated using word processor, purpose of study, importance of respondent, reasonable but specific time limit, make return convenient for respondent, assurance of confidentiality, informed consent, offer results, thank respondent, print in different color to appear personally, signed by high status. Step 7. Following up with non-respondents. A few days after the time limit specified in the cover letter, it is desirable to contact non-respondents by sending a follow-up letter along with another copy of the questionnaires and another self-addressed envelope. Step 8. Analyzing questionnaire data. The researchers who studied the teaching of qualitative research in institutions of higher education in the United States followed a typical approach to analyzing questionnaire data. Steps in preparing and conducting research interviews. Number 1 is defining the purpose of the study, selecting a sample, designing the interview format, developing questions, selecting and training interviewers, doing a pilot test of the interview procedures, conducting the interviews, and analyzing the interview data. Step 1. Defining the purpose of the interview. The first step in a study that will employ interviews to collect research data is to define the purpose of the study. Their purpose will determine the nature of the interview because different purposes require different levels of structure, types of questions, and interviewer qualification. Key important interviews, survey interviews, focus group interviews. A group interview involves addressing questions to a group of individuals who have been assembled for this specific purpose. The individuals are selected because they are well informed about the research topic. Step 2. Selecting a sample. A sample of respondents should be selected using one of the quantitative or qualitative sampling technique. The study needed a service for children with chronic illnesses. Lynch and her associate selected two sample: stratified sample of school district in California and a non-random sample of families with such children. Separate interview guides were developed for respondents in each sample. Step 3. Designing the interview format. Step 4. Developing question. A guide for interviewing teachers who had worked with a teacher leader. Step 5. Selecting and training interviewers. Step 6. Pilot testing the interview. Step 7. Conducting the interview. And here are the guidelines for conducting a research interview. Recording interview data. Step 8. Analyzing interview data. And here are the recommendations for using questionnaires and interviews as research instruments.